So it is really my honor to introduce to you Tony Alvarez. My workmate, my colleague, my best friend for 3 decades. I think that makes me uniquely qualified to introduce him. We've spent hundreds we've co-facilitated hundreds of programs. We've spent many hundreds of hours sitting together talking about the process of facilitation. And what would happen during our co-facilitation is that people, regardless of their level of experience, would come to me afterwards and say, "That was magic. How does he do that?" And I came to learn that Tony's magic comes from some very down-to-earth personal qualities. First is Tony is aloha. He loves people. People I often found hard to love. Tony just loves them. Tony has an ability, uncanny ability, to be present. He will stop what's going on in his brain and around him, and he will be present with people. And he engages with his body and his mind and his soul. And so, as I welcome Anita Tucker to continue the introduction, I want to invite you to just sit back and watch these qualities, because with Tony, they're always on.
So, like Gary said, I really feel greatly honored to join Gary and Julia in introducing Tony as the Kurt Hahn honoree. I honestly can say that without Tony Alvarez, I would never be where I am right now today. Tony is not only my mentor, my professional mentor, but he really is my personal and honestly my life mentor. In fact, he's part of my life narrative. I met Tony in 1995 in the fall of my first year of my MSW program at the University of Michigan. And I took a class from him on school social work. After that class, I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and that was merge clinical social work with adventure. But that was 22 years ago. And for those of you who are coming up in the field now, it was a very, very different time. There was no pathway for me to get to my goal. My road was never linear, often difficult, and really usually unclear. But my path had one consistent guide, and that was Tony. He was always a phone call away. You see, Tony gives to others his undivided attention, his compassion, and most of all, his support. He shows up and keeps showing up, even if that means challenging you when you need it, or when you may be leading yourself down the wrong path. See, my mentor, Tony, has shown me how to mentor my own students, which I do with pride. In fact, at one time, or many times, my students often refer to Tony, that he is their grandfather in adventure therapy. Kurt Hahn once said that there is more in you than you think. He also said, we are all better than we know. If only we can be brought to realize this, we may never be prepared to settle for anything less. I believe Tony embodies this, and Kurt Hahn, with his ability to see and to cultivate the best in each of us, so we never have to settle for less. Join me in welcoming Julia Alvarez, his daughter, who's next.
Thank you, Anita and Gary. It's an honor to have the opportunity of a lifetime to co-introduce someone who, like you, Gary, and so many people in this room, I have called colleague, mentor, and friend, but who I also have the distinct privilege of calling my dad. My name is Julia, and I'm Tony's middle daughter, middle child. As I was thinking about what I could say to introduce my hero, my steady, and my biggest fan, I came across this Kurt Hahn quote that made it so clear to me why he was selected to address us all today. There exists within everyone a grand passion, an outlandish thirst for adventure, a desire to live boldly and vividly through the journey of life. I want to invite you all to close your eyes for a second and just imagine what it must have been like to grow up with that guy as your parent. Yeah. So for those of you who know him, it is exactly what you are picturing. For those of you who don't know him yet, I will tell you that it was filled with quests, tall tales, and quiet moments. It was adventures on the high seas with Roly, Moly, and Poly, the alter egos he created for my siblings and I. And it was building fairy dreamscapes while hiking. It was early dusk family bike rides and foggy mornings on the rim of the Grand Canyon. It was presenting at my first AEE conference when I was 17 and spending the next 2 decades walking across fire and juggling paint with many of you in this room. And more recently, it's been hearing myself tell bedtime stories to my nephew, being bold enough to take risks because I've been taught to be unwilling to settle for the mundane, and it's been amazement as I watch him continue to nurture his thirst for adventure. My dad not only taught my siblings and me how to live boldly and vividly, but he did it in the way he knows best, by letting us find it for ourselves. I could not be more honored to invite you all to help me welcome the presenter of this year's Kurt Hahn address, my dad, Tony Alvarez.
To the Filipinos in the room, mayong hapon mga kababayan, lipay kay ko nga diya tatanan karon nganhi. To the Latino, Latinas, buenas tardes, amigos y amigas, y mis compañeros in AEE. For the Hawaiians, aloha kako. For those who speak French, pardon me. Salutations à mi famille et collègues. For those who speak Mandarin, pardon me. 祝贺. For the rest of you that maybe speak English, greetings, friends, family, and colleagues of AEE. Thank you for this honor. It means a great deal to me. When the leadership at the TAPG Best Practices Conference in New Hampshire came to me, cornered me, and I worried first. I had just finished a session, and I thought, oh shoot, I screwed it up or something. Somebody's have gotten hurt or something, right? And then when they told me that I had been awarded this honor, I was speechless and stunned. And those of you that know me, that doesn't happen, right? So, needless to say, I'm so grateful for this honor. And I accept this special award. It fills me with great humility and even greater conviction that my life with AEE has been a life well lived. And for that, I am so very touched and grateful. Thank you to all of you who took part in making this happen. I stand on the shoulders of many in this room, colleagues, students, friends, and family, without whom I would not be here today. I don't usually write speeches, I just write bullet points, but I needed to do this. Speaking of the awardees, I also would like to just take a moment to honor the life and contributions of Cliff Knapp. When he was here in 2009, he was a mentor and a teacher and a very good man and a friend of mine. And when he was here, he quoted Wangari Maathai, Kenyan winner of the 2004 Nobel Prize winner in his speech. And he went like this: until you dig a hole, you plant a tree, you water it, and make it survive, you have not done a thing. You are just talking. So thank you, Cliff. The process of preparing for this speech has been really quite challenging. For those of you that know me, I'm a believer in like having a point B. I want to be clear about why are we here today? You know, what does this mean, right? It's important to me to have that compass. And then I thought, why me? I mean, what should I speak about? And does it need to be fun? Should I engage them in some experience, you know, right? Does it need to be exciting? Should it be profound? Then I realized, I'm going to do it, because I certainly am not going to turn it down. I also realized that more than likely, no matter how I plan, I will probably show up the way I always show up in AEE. Open, spontaneous, and passionate about the work that we do. Once that was settled, all that was left was like the easy part. You know, spend 40 or so minutes talking to, right, a group, looking out at a group of amazing, non-judgmental, loving, kind, and compassionate folks. And so, as I stand here looking out at all of you, I know I was right. This is going to be fun. And there's this quote from Randy Pausch to guide me. Oh, I have a video. No. Do not tell people how to live their lives. Just tell them stories, and they will figure out how those stories apply to them. And so I thought, good, I'm just going to tell some stories. Yeah. So every morning I read from a book. Oh, that was there. That one. And look at today's reading. Look at today's reading. To be what we are and to become what we are capable of becoming is the only end of life. Right? Oh, it's kind of big there. Never mind. Yeah, it's a great reading. Okay. I want to focus our time together on 5 key points. I'm almost 70 years old. This month, I'm going to turn 70. Yeah. And I was born right after the Second World War on the island of Cebu in the Philippine Islands, one of 7,100 islands out in the Pacific. My mother stayed when she was pregnant and ready to give birth, stayed with her mother, as was custom for daughters about to give birth. My Lola, or grandmother, lived in a thatch roof, small house. I've heard that it was a Saturday and my mom was cooking breakfast when her water broke. So she turned to my dad and said, "Go fetch the doctor." And he did. He got on the bicycle and started biking quite a few kilometers to find the doctor, and then to bike back while the doctor semi-ran. By the time they got to the house, I was already born. My grandmother, my Lola, had born me. Waiting in lines and things like that, that's always been a pet peeve of mine. Yeah. My family identifies as mestizos, of mixed Spanish and Filipino heritage. I was the third boy born to my parents. After me came 5 sisters and 2 miscarriages. We all went to Catholic schools. In hindsight, I believe we saw ourselves as of high status, but with no money. For most of my growing up life, family was my rock. I looked to my older brothers for guidance and learning and support, even protection. My sisters provided conversations, enjoyment, laughter, and love. I also had 90 or so first cousins, because my father had like 12 brothers and sisters, as well as a whole batch of second and third cousins. I graduated from high school at 15. Not smart. It's just the standard age in the Philippines to graduate. And sought my father's advice for my future career. I mean, how many of us at 15 sort of know what we want to be for the rest of our lives? So he offered 3 options: be a doctor, be a lawyer, or be an engineer. And I'm like, doctor? No. Lawyers in the Philippines, they're all crooks. I don't want to be one. So I became an engineer, and in engineering school, there were like different styles of engineering, and I chose to be a chemical engineer, right? And so in my second year of chemical engineering, I had sort of had enough of college and had sort of discovered adolescence and dropped out of school and took a job as a temporary helper on a mobile oil tanker. Spent the next year on that ship, working, drinking, and feeling seasick pretty much every day. You know, I can't stand being on water. I love the water, but I get seasick very quickly. But I spent a year doing this. Suffice it to say, after that year, and then having developed medical issues because of excessive drinking, I returned home with loads of cash and supported myself through many years of school to complete my engineering degree. There wasn't much clarity for me about purpose and vision and what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then one evening in my 17th year of life, my brother and I borrowed my father's car. We lied, but anyway, we borrowed my father's car, went to a dance where we stayed for a total of 15 minutes, just enough to dance once or twice. And I met and danced with this beautiful, very intelligent-seeming girl from Kalamazoo, Michigan, who danced like there was just no tomorrow. And then my life changed. A long and wonderful story will not be shared here today, only that she became my wife and is here with me still, and again, 52 years later. And 48 years of marriage to be by my side, to support and encourage me, to be my rock, my everything. And she's also a social worker. Yeah. My first volunteer job was to help her and a Peace Corps volunteer create a space for street kids to learn, to eat, to grow. Now, mind you, remember that high status piece that I mentioned earlier? That meant that when you're mestizo, then you're up on the upper status level in the Philippines. And so you don't really spend a lot of time being around poor people, right? There was a bias, a discrimination in that way. And so because she was working there, then I had to kind of go work so that she could see how cool I was, right? And so this was not the thing that my parents appreciated, or my my cousins, my uncles. But so I went and I participated in this thing, in this school. It was transformational. It was so transformational for me, and it became the focus of my existence until I left the Philippines for the US in 1970. It was just profound. Having children, 3 children, is another transformational experience. Becoming a father, and now a grandfather, in the way that I wanted to be, has been an amazing journey. Remember, I'm a social worker. I worked for many, many years with children, a lot of boys and young men who didn't have very good relationships with their fathers. And so when I finally was going to be a father, I thought, I'm going to stay home and make sure that I can be the best father that I can be. So I went part-time and you know, we did all that kind of stuff just so that I could be there with them. The gifts that they shared with me, these 3 children, in letters and Father's Day card messages, told me that I may have played a big role in their lives, maybe even in a mentor role. They were amazing children and have grown up to be amazing young adults. 2 of them are here today, so I'm very proud of them. Yeah. And then there's AEE. Here's how I learned about and fell in love with AEE and its people. I started my professional career, my social work career, in 1975, overseeing a substance abuse prevention program through a mental health center in southern Michigan. After a year, the program was dissolved because it was a prevention program and there was no money at that time for that. And there was a job as a school social worker, which I took. Now, I'm providing services to elementary school kids in 4 or 5 elementary school buildings. And most of the kids I'm working with, probably 95% of them, are boys, acting out, right, impulsive. And the buildings that I had were, in those days, we called them the buildings across the track, and metaphorically and correctly, right? In terms of, these are where the poor folks lived, and people of color, the marginalized folks, the people who were the migrants who came up from Texas and other places to pick the fruits and the vegetables in Michigan. My best as a social worker at the time was talk therapy. Didn't take very long for me to realize that this wasn't working. So I consulted with one of my professors at the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan. And after sitting with me for a while, she said, here, I have 3 books for you. Take them home, read them, and use them. And I went home with 3 books from Pfeiffer and Jones. These were manuals. They were like structured experiences for the middle managers training. So as I'm walking out of there, I'm thinking, she's got to be senile. And it's like, you know, what the heck? I work with 8 and 10-year-old kids, and what am I doing with manager, you know, a book about management training, right? These kids I work with are like impulsive, they're described that way, impulsive, defensive, reactive, and behind in their academic skills. How will sitting around a table discussing a lifeboat scenario or a mine caving in situation help? Well, luckily, I grew up with many siblings and limited resources in the Philippines, where creativity and out-of-the-box thinking helped you get through very long, very hot summers. After checking out some of the activities, I was determined to try one out and make it work for my kiddos. I remember this afternoon very clearly. I looked around my garage, found an old rubber raft with holes, taped it up, you know, patched it up. Took it to the elementary school, went out to the back, our playground, and the playground was basically asphalt, part dirt, under no cover from the sun, and then an old basketball court over there, unused for decades. But I went and put the boat in the middle of the asphalt, and I went inside the building. I had a group coming up, so I took out some clothesline, and that became our mode of transportation. So as I walked from classroom to classroom, I picked up a kid, and they'd be like, you want to be the caboose or you want to be the engine, right? And so if you want to be the caboose, you know, hold on to the back, and we have to be quiet in the hallway. Let's go pick up Aaron, right? And so we're going down the hallway. You know, teachers love me. I can get the next kid. And, oh, the caboose is taken now, so you got to be the engine. So you have to be like this. Okay, so holding the rope, right? Until we gathered all the 7 kids, and then we get to the door to the playground, And I open it up, and of course, they're ready to run. And I'm saying, wait a second, we're going to convert our train. It's going to be an airplane now. Get on board, buckle those belts. And then we like together, woo, and we're flying around as we're running in the playground without letting go of the rope, right? All this stuff. And then I go, oh my gosh, look over there in the middle of the ocean. What do you see? And they're like, a boat. And they're like, yes, it's a boat. This is going to become a parachute soon. Get ready. Oh, okay. Get ready. And everybody holds onto the rope, and we become a parachute. And then we're like parachuting down into the boat, and we land in the boat. They never questioned what the rope was. And they never wondered why this boat was in the middle of this asphalt playground. They just knew it was true, and that there were sharks out there, and that the boat was leaking. Oh my gosh, it's leaking, and the water is coming in, and what are we gonna do, and this kind of stuff. Anyway, it was awesome, right? And I thought, OMG, right? This is going to be what I'm going to do forever, right? This is it. And so then, you know, there were just two things. First, that one, and then there's a cave-in thing, where like you take a group of, I don't know, adult tourists going down to someplace in West Virginia or something, and they go into an old mine shaft, and then the shaft collapses, and the oxygen is slowly diminishing, and the entrances and exit ways from this you know, abandoned shaft that had collapsed were very tiny. So you had to send somebody up to get some help. But that person, if they touched any part of the structure, it would collapse and the rest of us would die, right? So we had to send someone that we could really trust, right? So, well, I'm in a building, right? 4 floors, 4 stories. So my room becomes this cave, right? So I shut all the windows, cover them up in tarp and tape, and turn off all the lights. And when I go pick up the kids, you know, rope, come up to the entrance of my office, and then there we each get a flashlight, because that flashlight has light, and as long as there's oxygen, there is light. But soon it'll, you know, when the oxygen is gone, that flashlight will turn off, right? And so then, and from down there, we start crawling. Right? Now, mind you, this is like, my office is sort of like here, and then there's like the 6th grade classroom over there, the 3rd grade classroom over there, right? The 4th grade speech place, right? So it's not as if we're like far away somewhere in some wilderness where nobody's being, you know, hearing us. They're hearing us, and pretty soon you hear a teacher's door shut. You know, you know, and by then they're like, oh, it's Tony, you know, stuff. So then we're crawling in, and it's all dark, and we have all our flashlights, and we go all the way underneath my former desk, my office. It's covered in blankets, and so we all go in there, all 7 of them and me. So there's not much space. So we're all in there with our flashlights, right? And of course, they're like playing, and I go, oh my gosh, the oxygen is going, so yours is off, you know, and we're slowly losing oxygen. And then we have to send someone to the principal all the way down to tell them that, oh my gosh, Tony's room has been like torn apart, and it's dark, and we need help because the oxygen is going, right? And these, honest to goodness, this is like 2nd and 3rd grade, and they, me, I'm gonna go, or whatever. And it's like, well, should we send Alan? And, you know, Betty says, they will never listen to him because he lies all the time, you know. and they're like, he's a liar, right? The principal will never believe him, right? And so they did all this problem solving and brainstorming about like, who should they send, right? So that we could get help, right? Anyway, so I had a ball, right? And yeah, okay, now. So it took 10 years. I'm doing this for 10 years, okay? I'm adapting activities. I'm making things up. I mean, the kids I worked with were really from the lower class, right, with very little privilege. hardly any at all. And they never left their side of the track except to come to school. So I would create field trips, right? So I would rent a van, and I'd take, my 12 or 15 kind of cantankerous kids, and we would drive all the way up to Ann Arbor, right? It was like 30 minutes away, right, in this van. And then we'd go up and park up on a parking structure. And these parking structures in Ann Arbor are like 6 or 7 stories high, and the top of it is like open. So we'd go all the way up, park, we get out of the van. Kids, very quickly, they're running to the edges of the parking lot, right? They had never been up that high. They had never been up over trees. And right outside and a little bit to the, that distance over there is a big park in Ann Arbor where a lot of our students are just walking around. And this is the like middle 80s. So there's, there's still a lot of like Mohawks, and people walking around with their dogs and their Frisbees and Peace Man and all that kind of stuff, right? Very different from what they were growing up with in their hometown. And they were mesmerized. It's like, oh, never been this high up, and look, we can see all the way, and look, there are people walking, right? So, and we're talking between 8 and 11-year-old kids, right? This is what we've done, right? So there's these kids up there who are just like blown away by this thing. Meanwhile, I'm like, wow, and I'm looking at the clock. It's like we have a guide at the Science Museum who's going to like explain, show us the dinosaur museum, the dinosaur exhibit, because I had called in for a reservation, because that was the reason that they let me take these kids away from school, right? It was like a science field trip. That's what I called it anyway. I lied, all right. But anyway, that's what it was, right? So, so then they're like down there, and so we can't leave because they're just so busy. They're just enjoying themselves. Finally, by the time we go down to the place, the guide is being used by another group. And so then we just go and have lunch, right? So, so you begin to sort of like create adventures, right? Based on like what's available and what's there and what's unique and what will best invite the best self of each of these kids. The best self, right? And again, it could be ice cream, it could be parking lot, it could be a helicopter, it could be whatever. But I did this for about 10 years. And then, in 1985 or 86, Gary Kripe, not that Gary, but Gary Kripe comes into my life. He's a master's level social work intern who is assigned to work with me down in Monroe, to learn from me, right? I invite him in, and I say, I have a group to run. By now, I'm running a junior high program. I said, I have a group to run. Let's come over here, and I want to, watch me work. So I run a group. I get done, and after I'm done, he says, oh, you do adventure work. And I'm like, huh? I do what? He says, you do adventure work. And he says, I come from North Carolina, and, we have like Outward Bound over there, and Project Adventure came and trained the psychiatric, workers and stuff, and we were doing this adventure-based work and ropes courses, and there's these books, there's this, do you know Islands of Healing, and do you know like cow's tails and cobras, and I am just like, my heart, right? It's like two very strong emotions. It's like, holy moly, right? Like there are people like this, and there's like books, and I didn't have to do all these making up my own stuff for 10 years, right? It was like very love-hate. It was like, oh my God, where are my people? And holy crap, how come they didn't show up 10 years ago, right? That kind of stuff, right? And so it was like, oh, I was just so enthralled, right? And so soon after that, I met Jamal. I heard about this guy named Jamal who was like 45 miles away from Ann Arbor, who had been a PA person and had worked at this high school. Help me out with this, maybe Lee or somebody, like Jerry Pieh, P-I-E-H. He was somebody who was like old big guy in AEE or Outward Bound or something. But anyway, he was an awesome guy, and he was the principal, and he invited this guy Jamal to run an experiential center at his high school. And so I go up there and check it out, and it's just like really awesome, right? And then he says, oh, you should do a training in Project Adventure. And I'm like, okay, right? And so I go. And I'm just like, wow, there are people like this, right? And so I go for this training, and then a couple of years later, I attend my first AEE conference in Lake Junaluska. I think it was 1991. And let me tell you, that was where we were doing things like pant and blow. You probably don't want to know about that one, but, but we did interesting things. We were at this camp, and and it was just an awesome place. And yeah, so so that's where I learned about AEE. Yeah. Kurt Hahn shared, oh no, I'm missing something, sorry. Did you fix this, Rob? You shortened it. I went from page 6 to page 14. I get the hint. Yeah, okay. I got it right. Sorry, Rob. So it was this journey of mine through my life and learning about EE and then AEE and PA, this zigzaggy journey to find EE, I believe, that shaped my intentional actions towards being a conduit for people to learn more effectively about EE and adventure practice and AEE. Because of this sort of history for me, I made it a point to serve as a mentor here at AEE, to answer emails and queries from people. I mean, I get emails and queries from a lot of people, you know, all the time, wanting to know about wilderness programs or adventure programs or this kind of stuff, right? And I just recently, somebody just from Concord, New Hampshire, it's like, oh, I'm a social worker. I want to do this and do that. I'm like, talk to Anita. She's over there. You know, stop bugging me over here in Ann Arbor, right? And she's over there, right? But anyway, so people are always sort of, you know, whatever. And I make it a point. I think it's so important. I think it's so important when I come to AE to find the newcomers and to be a welcome. I know there's this sort of like sometimes this worry that if you have white hair, you must really know a lot. And so therefore, you can't even be close to them, right? And it's such a hogwash thing, right? It's like, we're just gray, you know? And we have stories, and we have experiences, and so do you. And don't sell yourself short. And just because you're here only for the first day means nothing. Just means you have a lot more opportunities than I do, right? So how cool is that? So I make that a point to find newcomers when we go to the TAPG pre-conference to really know who raises their hand, right, when they're new. And yeah, and I bring my, and I love mentoring students. I'm a lecturer at the University of Michigan School of Social Work, right? I'm not tenured, never been tenured. I'm a lecturer, and nothing on my job description says you have to advise students, nothing. And you know, when I left the middle school after like 25 years as a school social worker, my room was like an island of healing, right? It was like a space where kids could come, whether they were on my caseload or not. They would show up. Hey, I hear that there's a jar here for like people that forget their lunch. I don't know who you are, but yeah, there's the jar, because I kept the jar with some money. And when kids, you know, forgot their lunch money, they could just come and borrow, and then hopefully they replaced it because it never got empty, right? And kids would come in and would need time. Sometimes they escape from a math test, right? I would do that too. and sometimes because they really needed to figure something out, right? So my room at the middle school was sort of like that. And when I was leaving school social work and you know, that practice, I was really sad that I was gonna not have that anymore. And then they gave me an office at the U of M School of Social Work. And it's kind of the same. But now the kids are a little older. And, you know, sometimes they're from my class, and they come and they want to talk about something, right? Whatever they want to talk about. And sometimes they just want to connect. And I'm okay with that. My door's always open, right? But all that kind of action is intentional. It's because I didn't get that. And I want people to get that. And so, right? So if there's someone out there and that's what their need is, then I'd love to be open to be there for them. So, thank you. Kurt Hahn shared, "We are all better than we know. If only we can be brought to realize this, we may never be prepared to settle for anything less." Right? I went through a lot of his quotes, and I thought, this one so resonates with my life. I didn't grow up with self-confidence. I didn't grow up, you know, I mean, I play basketball like there's no tomorrow. I mean, not anymore, I'm getting older, but when I was younger. But I never played sports when I was growing up. I was always a little heavy. I lacked self-confidence. I tried to be like the laugh of the group, you know, the ha-ha, you know, make jokes, but I wasn't very good at it. And then these things happened. People connected, and people that saw in me more than I saw in me. And so that notion, that quote, that connections, right? People that know us and love us and care for us and give us good feedback and tell it like it is, and they do it because they want us to grow, right? That's just so awesome. And that I've been blessed with that. I've been blessed with that here, and I continue to be blessed by that. So that's really cool. Okay, we're going to get up. I thought that we're going to be in a table in circles, so just make it up. Get up. Yeah. And just, yeah, stretch. People are, yeah, shake it out. Yeah, don't. Okay. And then do sort of a 360. Look at who's around you. Right? If you don't know who they are, just say, "Hi, my name is this." All right. Come on, AEE. Only 4 seconds. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Okay. So you have a sense about who's around you. So find one person, right? And just talk for a minute. Listen and share. Right? When you think of your best self, right? If you have an image like, if I was going to be my best self right now, what might that look like, right? And then find somebody in your circle and share that with someone, and then listen to them tell you about who their best self looks like. And you have 2 minutes altogether. Okay, go. All right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to cut you short. Another point is practice authentic engagement, right? I think about that, and I think about showing up and being who you are, being fully present, and that when that happens, things happen, magic happens, right? I want to tell you a story. I've been lucky in my EE career, because close to 40 years of this stuff. First, as a matter of survival, right? Not knowing what else to do, and then as a matter of choice, I've been able to be productive. And so this slide here are, you know, some of the things that I've created, sort of by myself or with other people's help. And I want to speak a little bit about this notion of extending the 50-minute hour, right? Because oftentimes time becomes a real problem for us. Whether we're running a program or seeing an individual client or whatever, we get caught up, and then it's like, oh my gosh, we're done with time. And so sometimes we don't really transition out of an experience. We sort of go, and then we get here and we go, okay, instead of a really intense debrief, let me just tell you what I saw you do. Boom, 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 we're done, like that, right? And so the idea of sort of like extending that time that we have in terms of the influence that we have on our clients and our participants has been something that I've been thinking about for a while. So I struggled with this idea, how do I work with these kids? Because the kids are in my office and they're doing amazing stuff. I mean, they're just like the best kids you've ever imagined. And then they leave the office door and they become the brats that the teachers see, right? They behave back in the same way that they had behaved in the past. And so then I thought about this piece. How can I enhance, extend that time? And then I was sorting through, I'm a hoarder, kind of. And so I was sorting through some of the stuff back home in my house, and I found a bag of Filipino coins that my mom had given me, soon after I had left the Philippines. They're beautiful 1 peso coins with a big carabao in the front and Jose Rizal on the other side, right? So meaningless to anybody, not very worthy, but important, and it had a connection to me. And so I started thinking about this coin and thinking that this is something I'm going to give to my clients. And so it didn't happen after day whatever. It was just when I thought that this was a good time, there was a match, that it's time to pass on this coin, then I would. So for some kids, I got it to them early on in our relationship because I would tell them, keep it in your pocket. And so they would keep it in their pocket. And this is a true story. One 13-year-old kid told me that he went to do his usual, stealing from the grocery store, gum, that kind of stuff, right? Shoplifting. And taking stuff on this one day, putting it in his pocket, and then finding the Filipino coin. And he said to me, when I looked at that coin, I thought, well, what would Tony say about this, right? And he put his coin back and took out the gum and returned it, right? And so for that kid, it needed to be early on because he needed some help, right? For other kids, it became this thing of like, oh, you're the best social worker ever. Nobody's ever going to be like you. And I go, don't say that, right? Because you're going to find other people. The reason why you're doing so well is because you've put out the effort, right? You have engaged in this journey that I've offered to facilitate. That's all I'm doing, right? So thanks for all those great words, but you are the one, right? So here's a coin, right, that connects us forever. And the coin was conditional, right? You have to always know where this is. This is important, right? So Mike was one of these students. He was in the 3rd grade, a biracial kid who struggled, hard family, hard life. For those of you that are mestizos or biracial, right, we sometimes don't fit in one or the other. And he struggled. And so I started with him when he was about 8, and he joined me at the junior high all the way through 9th grade. And right around the 9th grade was when I presented him with a coin. That was, for me, that was the time for Mike. So I gave it to him, and we talked, hugged, all that stuff. And then he moved on to high school, and he had his own helpers and all this stuff, and I didn't see him again. 10 years later, right, I'm back at the junior high doing my work in the afternoon, and the office lady comes up and says, hey, there's a family here to see you. And I'm like, oh, all right. They were not on schedule, right? Because I'm so scheduled. Let me look in my book. Oh, there's nothing. Okay. Right? So I go over there, and it's Mike. Right? He's like, I don't know, 26 years old or something. There's Mike, and there's his wife, and there's his 2 kids. And so a hug, oh, how nice. Oh, thank you for coming. How nice this is, right? You want to come sit in my office for a minute? So we go and sit in the office, right? As soon as we sit, the wife says, okay, Mike said you're going to ask. And I'm like, I'm going to ask? And then she goes into her purse, and she whips out the Filipino coin. And she says to me, we have moved, since we've been married, we have moved 6 times. This is the first thing that gets packed in my house. And this is the first thing that gets put in our new house, right? It has been a pain, right? And I'm like, oh, that's so cool, right? Right? Oh. And then I turned to the kids. There was a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I say to the 9-year-old, so what do you think about this coin? And she says, oh, my dad says, we have to, that's like our treasure. And we have to save that because that was given to him by a person that was the best person he had in his life. And then she looks at me and she says, is that you? And I go, yeah. And she runs up and gives me a hug. I know. It's like, it was just like, oh, that's so cool, right? Anyway. It's not about the coin. You know that. And it's not about me giving them the coin. You know that. It's about that relationship and that connection, right? And the relationships that we create with the people that we work with, right? We might think it's just our job. We might think we're done with that program. We might think, oh, that kid's now in a therapeutic boarding home, and they're going to go from that to whatever else, right? And we're done with them, right? But they will only be done with us when we decide it's time. And so their experience is what's more important, right? And for us to be open to whenever that's going to come back to bite us, so to speak, right? And in my practice, at least, I believe that if I'm not making things up, if I'm just being me, then I don't have to be like, like I have to pretend that I remember about this coin, like that, right? Because it happened and I know it and I remember it, right? Because it's authentic, right? And many of us are in this boat together about authenticity. So and then I moved to Hawaii and spent a few years there with my wife. And when we came back, and over there, I was working in the island of Molokai. And on the island of Molokai, I was working at a community center. My daughter Antonia and I were there. We were working with the staff and the participants. And one day, this native Hawaiian woman came up, and she had, homemade thread with half a shell of kukui, right? And she put it around my neck, right? I guess she had heard about my work that was happening in the community. And it's not left my neck since then. That was, I think, 2005 or 4 or something. And you can find this at the beaches. Nowadays people create lei here. Lei out of kukui, but the original kukui is just this hard, rough, nothing special nut. Inside it is a waxy oil that back in the day the native Hawaiians used to light their torches, right? And so the kupuna of today, the elders of today in Hawaii, speak about us looking sort of like, these are polished, but unpolished kukui. But inside of us, we have this capacity to bring light to the planet, right? Inside of each of us, we have this capacity to bring light to the planet. And so, so since I've been back to the mainland and to Michigan, when I finish a training or a class or an experience, then I gift kukuis. And the gifting is a conditional gift. So I open my bags, I put out my kukui, I tell them the story, and I invite people to take one. However, if you take one, you have a responsibility. And the responsibility is to always know where your kukui is. So for me, because I always keep it here, then it's always close to me. This is sort of like my church. I don't go to a regular church, right? I hold on to this when I need to ground myself, right? So the kukui is an offering, right? So in the room today, we have bags of kukui, and there are going to be some folks that are going to be helping. Do we know where they are? They're going to be on the front table over there and the front table over here. And they're just going to be a whole different one. Some of them have a turtle picture. Some of them are flowers, right? And my invitation to you is to take a kukui with you for the duration of the conference and think about, is the best self showing up? Are you doing your best to be your best? And are you authentic in that? And that's a challenge for most of us, but if we stay focused, then what might happen? Well, Mario and other places, people say magic happens. Magic happens. And that's stuff we know about, right? We know about magic. I've run out of time, but I'm going to talk about one more thing. I leave my speech available for anyone who wants to read it. But I really wanted to just, this is not a walking stick, by the way. This is a stick. And there are many students of mine that have sticks and people that have had sticks. And there are folks here who have kukuis. Can we have a shout out for those that have kukuis? Yeah. And now you can be part of that, if you choose. One of the points was about embracing and celebrating other people's work. And I have a quick story. I'm sitting at a pre-conference. I'm listening to this man. His name is Tom, and he was a member of a climbing team that went up Mount Everest to see if they could recover Sir Mallory's body, right? So he tells us a story about getting to the edge, to the final camp, just before summit. And he is hallucinating. He is just like pretty much half dead and having a really hard struggle with, I need to finish. I need to be there for the end. But his dreams and his hallucinations were of images of his children saying goodbye to him, right? I mean, he was in a very bad place, you know, physically. And so he tells us this story on how he decided not to summit. And he's been reflecting on that all his life. So he comes to this conference to talk about this, and I'm sitting in the audience. Then afterwards, we have a question and answer thing. And somebody asked him about oxygen and, you know, the use of oxygen when you climb, you know, Mount Everest. And, you know, what do you know about this stuff? And he says, you know, I don't know, I've always gone with oxygen. But, you know, there's somebody in the audience, you know, and he points. There's somebody in the audience that, you know, has done this twice, you know, gone up to Everest and has not used oxygen, right? And first I thought he was pointing to me. I'm like, oh, no, it's not me, right? But then the person next to me, who I'd spent like the last 6 hours with, right, who never said anything about this, turned out that was him. He's like this world climber. His name is Mario Bilodeau. He never once said anything about this stuff, right? And it made me think, I wonder what kind of stories are in this room. I wonder what stories people have that we never give the opportunity to share. And then it's like, well, there's the opportunity to share, but there's also the action I can take. I can come to you and I can say, hey, I want to know your story. And then it gives you the opportunity to say, oh yeah, I climbed Mount Everest, or oh yeah, I've scaled Annapurna, or oh, yeah, my name is Terry, and I biked, you know, from California to, you know, to New York, you know, and also did 8,000 miles of biking, and I'm just like, right? Yeah. And there are people like that. I just want to name a few, right? The folks from UNH. New Hampshire, right, Mike and Anita and a whole bunch of people there that have worked hard to create this center for outdoor behavioral health care, right? There's Lee and Keith, whose work continues to drive us forward, right? And without those folks, right, we would be somewhere else, right? Bobby Beal and her crew, right? Her commitment, right? Commitment not just to here, but to those marginalized and suffering families in Ohio, right? You should ask her about that, right? There's Mari. I mean, I wake up looking for her Facebook postings of Henry and George, right? Because of that, because she's telling us a story through the eyes of her children of what we have to do. We are in charge of this planet, and those kids are watching us. And we have some things to do. And she does that at 4 in the morning, probably, with not much sleep. The drivers of the TAPG bus many years ago, Gary and Kim Sackstetter and Tiffany and a bunch of us who organized, we got to make best practice work. We got to get this going and TAPG going. The Play for Peace initiative, how cool is that, right? Marimed, the folks in Hawaii, yeah? Matt and Craig, who worked and stood up and advocated for Native Hawaiian youth, right? There's this guy, Kim Wasserberger. If you haven't experienced him, you need to, right? His creativity and the efforts that he puts in comes from the gift of knowing people who are hurting and connecting with that, right? There's Santa Fe Mountain Center. There's the courage of Christina, this Norton lady, right? I mean, she packs up her kids and her husband and says, we're going to Taiwan and we're going to make this an outward bound experience, right? The courage of that woman. And then finally, Christiani Teen. I know he's not here, but the last year or so he's been struggling with cancer, and he's on Facebook and he's telling us the nitty-gritty of what life with cancer is like. Right? And that's just the people I know that I wrote down. Every one of us is doing amazing work. And we're doing it because AEE invites us and provides us with the opportunity to connect, and through connection, to belong. So when we show up, and if we show up and we're not ready, and we show up not authentic, we show up tunneled in, right? We're doing a disservice not only to the people around here, but to ourselves. To ourselves. 22 years ago, I gave my first keynote. Boy, I'm going through this very fast, Rob, sorry. Because I want to talk about hope very quickly, because hope is essential, right? 22 years ago, in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, in 1995, I was invited to speak at an AEE conference around the topic of seeds for change. In that speech, I spoke and sang some of the song, The Impossible Dream, sung by Don Quixote in The Man of La Mancha. And those words continue to inspire me because they invite our adventure spirit of challenge and courage, social justice, and hope. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. Right? Isn't that awesome? Yeah? Things are hard in our planet. They are hard. Not just in the US, they are hard everywhere. The toxicity spreads throughout our lands and our waters, into our souls, into our homes, all over our cities and towns. What is there for us to do? Grace Lee Boggs, this awesome lady who died when she was 100, offered this. We urgently need a paradigm shift in our concept of the purposes and practices of education. We need to leave behind the concept of education as a passport to more money and higher status in the future, and replace it with a concept of education as an ongoing process that enlists the tremendous energies and creativity of children in rebuilding and respiriting our communities and our cities now in the present. I love this message and believe it applies to other areas besides education. There is room in all facets of our citizenship to get clarity about what we believe is good for this country. What is our country's best self? What does that look like? Because if we do not have that vision of this best self for our cities, our communities, our homes, our families, our planet, then we will go astray. And we have, right? There's a band called Steel Wheels. They posed a powerful question to us in their song, With It All Stripped Away. I'm going to kind of sing this. With no power, no status, no women, no men, with it all stripped away, where will you stand? With no profit, no weapons, no money in your hand, with it all stripped away, where will you stand? Stand up in the early morning. Stand up when there is no warning. Stand up when the storm is rising all around. With no color, no creed, no Bible to defend, with it all stripped away, where will we stand? When this world turns violent, when there's no side left to win, with it all stripped away, where will you stand? Stand up when the wind is blowing. Stand up when the tears are flowing. Stand up when justice calls and you hear the sound. So when you're quiet, alone, and this day has met its end, with it all stripped away, when did you stand? With it all stripped away, when did you stand? This is our call, right? We are adventurers. We engage in action. Let's funnel in our action and our work to make things happen. Final point. I don't have long to be here. We don't have long to be on this planet. Some of us have less time than others. Nothing seems certain except that we will all pass on. Perhaps there's a lesson here to be learned, that whatever we do or do not do, we will have an effect. We will leave an imprint. The choice is ours about what that imprint will do for those who are remaining. So join me in singing this song, initially written by Pete Seeger in the year of my birth, and sung since then by many others, even with the addition of new lyrics. I'd love it if you could join me at least in the chorus, because I don't even know the real song, but I'm going to make it up. And I brought a guitar with me because I was really impressed. I was in Taiwan visiting there with Chimo and other people, and I visited this community center. And we walked in, looking around at the beautiful center, and we went into this one room where people were practicing ballet and things. Didn't that look like ballet? Right. Ballet and things. And then there was another room where people were playing the guitar. There were two girls there, 13, 14-year-old young women singing, playing the guitar. So we walk in there, the boss of the center and my host and me, we go in and we sit. And we ask them to translate and say, do you mind if we're here? Of course, we're already in. So they say, okay, right? And then they stopped playing. And I said, oh, could you please sing a song for us? Because I heard a little bit of your singing, right? So translated. And this 13-year-old girl picks up her guitar and sings this song. I was just like so impressed by this courage, right? So I said, can I borrow your guitar? Now, I'm not a guitar player. Can I borrow your guitar? She said, sure. And I said, you know, your courage just inspired me to play you a song, right? So I sat down and I asked a friend to Google, you know, the songs and the lyrics and the whatever, right? And then of Imagine, and then I played it, and I played the Imagine song very poorly, right? Because I really am not a guitar player. But I just thought, you know, why? We can go up there and say, I'm going to challenge myself, you know, and go up on the pamper pole. But oh no, I don't sing in karaoke, right? It's like, right? Walk your talk everywhere in life, right? And so I decided I'm going to bring the guitar, I'm going to play it, I'm bad at it, I'm going to sing a song, I don't know how it goes, but I'm going to do it anyway. But when the chorus comes, if you can help me, that would be really awesome, all right? And then I'll be done. Okay, that doesn't work. All right. And I play left-handed, so don't be like, oh, he really doesn't know how to play the guitar. And it goes like, I always wanted to be Bruce Springsteen. The chorus goes like this. Passing through, passing through. We are only passing through, passing through. Come with me, work with me. Passing through. We are only passing through. We're good. Okay. Now I'm bad, but that's all right. Just listen to the words. We are passing this world on to our kids. From the day when they climb from their cribs, we'll try and teach them well, show them that they're loved. But in the end, all we can do is hope our best was good enough. They'll witness how this life can be so beautiful and cruel. We can't shelter them forever, but we show them all the tools. They might leave this world in a little better shape than me and you, 'cause we are only passing through, passing through, passing through. Louder, please. We are only passing through, passing through, passing through. We are only passing through. We are watching this world from our living rooms. Near 40 years since we walked on the moon. This big blue ball is shrinking, and I don't know if that's good. But for better or for worse, now this whole world's our neighborhood. And there's no place left to run to stay above the fray. We better learn to get along, not just to get our way. Not only for each other, but for our children's children too. 'Cause we are only passing through. No chorus. There's one more stanza. Shoot. And I wonder sometimes, what will I pass on? How much can one voice do with just a song? Sometimes injustice and indifference are all that I see, but I refuse to let my hope become the latest casualty. So I'll sing of love and truth and try to practice what I preach. If I can't change the world, I'll change the world within my reach. What better place to start than here and now with me and you? 'Cause we are only passing through. No chorus. I saw Colin on the field take a knee before the game. He said, I will stand for this no more. Martin led us here before. Now it's time for us to soar. Our time is short and we're only passing through. It was a long and painful fight, struggling for women's rights. She stayed the course, her aim was straight and true. The ballot is now free, thanks to Susan B. Cast your vote for truth before you pass on through. Chorus. Pass on through, pass on through. We are only passing through, passing through, passing through. We are only passing through. Thank you.